And I guess this episode would be episode 4, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, episode 4, that's what we'll be doing today.
I tell you, lay all that stuff out. Wowzer. Wowzer.
What's our topic?
A heavy duty topic.
Heavy duty. And another heavy duty one.
Oh.
Last week's was nice and fluffy.
Fluffy. Oh, yeah, gardening. I was going to mention that. Well, we don't have to get into that. Something I forgot to bring up.
Go ahead.
No, it's just about the planning depth, the way to do that, and using a broomstick and a piece of tape and a tape measure and blah, blah, blah. It's all... We're moving on. Let's just move on.
Okay. What is today's topic?
Today's topic is, well, I'll tell you, it's about what's going on right now. For those people just tuning in, this is the last weekend in May, and as you may know from the past, because this isn't a live podcast, George Floyd was essentially killed in police custody a couple of days ago, and that has sparked a lot of angry protesting and violence in our country yet again over what appears to be the unnecessary. Well, I didn't see it. I'm secondhand to me. I'm getting it via news story, but as it comes across, a murder.
Yes.
And in fact, I believe the police officer is charged with murder, so we can go ahead and say a murder. A murder of a black person in custody of the police, and it was, of course, a white police officer. So, racism
Is our topic.
is our topic,
Yeah.
and it's a disgusting topic, but it's there, and it's in our faces again. And the consequences of racism in our face again.
Yep. And really the reason we're doing this, like you said, is because of the recent events this week. Those are really open wound right now.
Well, it's just, I don't freaking understand it. I don't understand. Why is it that it gets to this point? I mean, these protests, you can call them riots. I haven't... you're showing me pictures here of the burning of the police station on the computer screen, and other buildings on fire, stores. Is that Minnesota?
Minneapolis.
Okay. It's very reminiscent of what happened after the 4 cops were acquitted from beating Rodney King in the 90s.
I don't believe they were acquitted.
They were found not guilty, I believe. You're right. They weren't acquitted. They were found not guilty.
No, I think 2 got charges.
No. Look it up. I think those cops got off. They were, yes, I was listening to the radio when it happened. I remember we were just, everyone was standing there and was like unfreaking believable.
And Rodney King's a good point to bring up, because some of these names of these murders and incidents in the past are being searched very high. They're trending on Google, in fact, because of everybody searching up this event and now these other ones too, because they're very similar. But yeah, you can compare it to the Rodney King riots. And yeah, so let's see.
Rodney King was a shocker. I mean, the thing is I remember there was a lecture, college lecture, it was entitled, and I'll never forget it. It was called Visual Literacy. And we all know what literacy is, right?
Yes.
Explain literacy, the ability to read and write, and
Yes.
right.
And basically just interact with words and stuff.
Right. And there was this professor who had put together a lecture. He entitled it Visual Literacy. And it was all about understanding visual stimuli in context. Because what was happening during the Rodney King trial is there was a video taken. Nowadays, cameras are everywhere, of course, and videos everywhere. But back then, in the 90s, it wasn't so much. And what had happened was Rodney King had been zooming through towns, speeding through different jurisdictions,
150 on the
and
freeway,
would not yield to the police officers that were chasing him. Finally, once the cops got him pulled over, they pulled him out of the car and they tased him, and they literally, once he was on the ground, began to beat him with the billy clubs. Basically, it was a beating. There was no part of that video that any right, free-thinking person could say wasn't a beating. It was a beating. The cops took out their frustration of chasing him
out on him,
out on him, instead of just arresting him and taking him off to jail, as our society dictates should happen. That's what we expect from our police officers. And through the course of the trial, what the attorneys were doing was manipulating that tape by placing it in slow motion.
Yep.
And showing things outside of normal. They manipulated the tape.
They basically made it so there was no emotional beating anymore.
So you could not. Exactly. They slowed it down so the beating did not look as severe. They would stop frame it and leave it at frames where Rodney King looked as though he were aggressive, like they took a freeze frame out of the video with him maybe being in a defensive posture.
Yes.
And that defensive posture, because it was taken out of the context of the motion, looked as though he was taking an offensive posture with the police.
Yes. And
this was done in that trial. Now, whether or not, of course, I wasn't a juror, whether or not that led to the jury deciding that's why those police officers were found not guilty, or because of racism in the jury, who knows?
Well, the jury consisted of 9 white, 1 Latino, 1 biracial, and 1 Asian, and they all found the 4 officers not guilty.
Not exactly a jury of your peers.
No.
They did not go into South Central Los Angeles, where I believe Rodney was from. Not 100% sure on that.
This was in 12 residents from distant suburbs of
Simi Valley,
Ventura County.
But yes, Simi Valley, California. That's the city in Ventura County. Those are not your peers. That's problem number 1. Right?
Yes.
Your peer group. Explain peer group. What's a peer group?
Basically, the people you hang around, well, not necessarily hang around, but the people you're around every day. So, in our case, it'd be like Weld County. This kind of smaller group of section of people that, we're around, we don't necessarily know, but they know our everyday life because they're in the same area. They're in the same place. They experience similar things as we do.
Okay, would it also be safe to say that they would be our age group?
Yes. Typically, age group, if you're in the same area, I'm saying, a decade or younger, a decade older, when you get towards more adulthood.
Sure. I get you.
Considered in your age group because, that's a little normal because your workforce is typically made up of those type of people.
Now, that's a good observation. Would your peer group be considered folks in the same line of work? In other words, would bankers and lawyers and doctors be my peers?
Yes, if they were in the same area as you were. No, if they weren't in the same area.
Even though our occupations are vastly different.
No, so it depends on
the thing you mentioned, the things that a person experiences. Now, a doctor and a lawyer, from the time they get out of bed, go to work, and come back home, have vastly different experiences from me when I get up, go to work.
In their workplace, but everywhere else, like their social life may be similar.
Oh, yeah. I have friends that, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
it's about placement, basically location.
Okay.
If you're doing a trial based specifically off work, like something happened in the workplace, you'd want people from a similar workplace in a similar location.
So if that were in the context of the crime.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why witnesses are typically your peers.
Gotcha. Yep. So peers, back to what I was saying. Those folks on the jury were not Rodney King's peers, and I believe that we are allowed to be judged by a jury of our peers. So, I mean, your first mistake right off the get-go, that trial was just loaded with problems, moving the trial out of the county, Los Angeles, where the crime occurred, allegedly, to Simi Valley. That's the cultural difference between those two places are night and day. So it's not a peer group because they have not the same experiences.
No.
At the time of those riots,
Which this is 90s, early 90s. His beating was March 3rd, 1991. Just to be clear, we're comparing this to today, George Floyd. Don't mix those two up. This is early 90s.
well, I'm just comparing. I'm talking
talked
about it
about.
because I have direct experience with it.
I know,
I
but
was in Los Angeles when
started
it
with-
erupted in flame in 1991.
Yes, but we started with George Floyd, and all of a sudden
We'll
were
get
going
back to that.
We were. I'm just making sure the listeners understand. This is the early 90s. This is not today.
Not today. So,
No. Yeah. Just this is
30 years ago.
Yes. There you go.
30 years ago. That is a generation. That is a person being born and grown into adulthood.
Yep. Like I'm nowhere near that.
You're inside your first generation. You're 16 years old. You're growing up to your adulthood.
So I'm not in the 90s. I'm not.
No, but this
Yes.
George Floyd is you.
Yes, George Floyd is my generation's first experience, or not first, but one of the first big experience with a hate crime.
And that's what the thing about Rodney King was, as any sensible human being, it was hard to think for half a second this wasn't racist. All the cops were white, middle-aged, I don't want to use the word looked like, but boy, did they have the air of your good old boy. The feeling was around them. What was I saying? Saying that it was just hard not to think that the judgment was somehow racially motivated. Now, what came out of the judgment was the riots of 1991 in Los Angeles, and I believe other countries around, or other cities around the country. But definitely the worst of it was, Los Angeles. What happened there
It was crazy.
It's happening again.
And that brings up a point that I was surprised by Mom. She's like, she told me, she's like, when we were talking about this earlier this week, she's like, that's what made your dad buy a gun. And I'm like, whoa, he bought a firearm just because, you lived around this area?
I had a gun. It's what made me start carrying a gun.
And just to be scared, like, no normal person carries a gun. No typical normal person is scared enough in their everyday life just to carry a gun.
Let me give you a little background.
Yes.
Florence and Normandy,
Yes.
the epicenter.
Yep.
I was there
I know. That's what
delivering.
I'm saying. It's crazy.
2 hours before Reginald Denny went through that intersection in his cement truck. I could have very well have been there. If the verdict had come down earlier, I could have been there. That part of town, Compton, South Central Los Angeles, deliveries for the company I worked for, a blind company at the time, and I would go out every Wednesday and make deliveries to our customer. We had a service. We would offer free delivery once a week to them, and I would go out, and we had 3 or 4 customers in that part of Los Angeles. And the factory was out in Ontario, and I actually lived in Rancho Cucamonga. Those places are miles apart, not only physically, but in just makeup. Yeah. The predominant race in that part of Los Angeles was African American. The people that I sold the product or delivered to, I mean, the company sold the product to, they were African American. And I would go in, and I just never in a million years would I consider myself. I mean, there was crime, and there were things called carjackings going on down there. But, you know, you're aware of it. You give yourself space when you park in an intersection to get away. You keep your windows rolled up and the doors locked, and that's just being smart. But after those riots, after things caught on fire, and those businesses, they all burnt down. They were gone.
Yeah, I'm just scrolling through pictures here. There's cars on fires, buildings on fires, the National Guard's there. There's
oh my God!
Police officers with shotguns.
However long it was later, when I went back into the area, I think there was one business that did survive that was still purchasing our product. And I went back into the area weeks later, but I drove through just entire streets, blocks of burned out buildings.
Yeah.
And all stemming from, and it was racism. Bullshit if it wasn't. Here's the thing. There was another thing that happened 30 years before that in 1968. Something called the Watts riots.
The Watts?
Watts riots. Type it in.
Okay.
Type it in.
WATT?
And yeah, of course, I was a baby in 68 and, you know, nowhere near Southern California. But
this is 65, August 11th to August 16th, 1965.
I think that was sparked by racial police brutality as well.
Let's see what History.com has to say about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. My history was, I think it was a woman that was beat up.
Predominantly black neighborhood of Watts, Los Angeles. So this is in the same
Yes,
area,
it's the same area. It's, in fact, Compton and Watts are right next door to each other.
resulting in 34 deaths, 1,032 injuries, and 4,000 arrests.
That's probably similar to what happened in March of 91.
Destruction of 1,000 buildings and $40 million in damage. Wednesday evening, let's see what happened. Step Brothers.
There, Marguerite failed the sobriety test and panicked, I don't have glasses.
So Step Brothers Marguerite and Ronald Fry were pulled over by a white California Highway Patrol officer while driving their mother's car. Margaret failed a sobriety test and panicked as he was arrested. And
Scuffle broke out. Crowd began to gather.
anger rose to...
Backup police arrived.
Yep.
Knocked down by a riot baton. Handcuffed.
Yep. So
Verena was
basically,
arrested.
they kind of resisted arrest and
Yep.
then got beat.
The crowd
for
got
it.
angrier, and the scene got more and more violent.
As the-
Two motorcycle police attempted to leave. One was spat on.
Yep.
Yeah, similar.
Basically, yeah.
Very
a bad
similar.
Arrest.
There was an
a
accident
crowd.
in the intersection of Florence and Normandy. People were already out in the streets yelling and screaming because the verdict had come down for Rodney King. Not Rodney King, but for the four officers, Kook, I can't remember their names.
Their names.
And people were pissed. The accident happened. I think a black person crashed into the car of a Latino woman. They started arguing. Then she got hit and ran away. It was just, Coon Powell Wind
and Brees.
I can't pronounce his name, unfortunately. Anyways, the point behind all this was that now violent protests have broke out again.
Yep.
And the problem is, I don't freaking blame them for burning down the police station in Minneapolis.
A certain anger makes you want eye for an eye. But here's the problem, like with the Rodney King had to come on television crying and say, we need to stop this. Yes,
The thing about that is people mocked that, but those simple words, can we just get along, is really what needs to happen in the world.
Yeah.
It's what needs to happen. It's as racism is so fracking ridiculous. Tell me, I have to ask you, because, I mean, I know how you were raised,
Yeah.
and certainly not with your parents spouting off racist attitudes. But what is your opinion
On what?
on racism?
It's bullshit.
Okay, that's simple to say, but I don't understand it. What is your understanding? Or yes,
Why would you think? I mean, culturally, it's important to have culture. Culture is very important to some people, just like religion is. You want to identify with a certain type of people, and I get that. But in a way, I'm against religious groups and cultural groups to a point. I'm not saying I do what you want.
Here's the thing: it's a division sort of thing. When
It's
we
a
need
division, because
unity,
they're trying to. You're uniting with that specific cultural, ethnic group or a religious group or whatever, but you can't bring that to the point to where you're not respecting other groups like that or other people in general. You can have your cliques, I guess, your groups, your social gatherings, what you want to identify as, but you can't use that as a reason to put down others. That's my opinion on it.
Where does it come from? Where does it
Bias.
Where does it come from?
Everybody's subject to bias. It's just a human tendency.
Hold on. I don't know. Is there everybody?
Everybody is subject to bias, no matter what it is. Not necessarily with ethnical groups or anything. Bias is as simple as liking Burger King better than McDonald's. It's just a human tendency that has been around forever. It's always been in human nature to have bias. It's like my favorite color is red. It's your favorites. It's what I like.
So how does hatred stem from bias? It's not that you like or you hate the other colors.
It's because
it's just that red is your favorite.
It really goes back to nature and how progression in nature happens. You see outside, if you walk outside, birds have to compete for their food, right? It's a competition-based thing because naturally you'd have to have competition with other species as well as your own to survive. We're way
past the need for survival. Yes, people don't need to.
That human tendency still exists.
But here's the thing. This is why I don't understand it, Hayden. I celebrate the differences between my culture and other cultures.
Well, that's the thing. Your bias isn't towards ethnicity or religious groups or anything. Your bias is more probably towards workplaces, favorite colors, favorite foods, blah, blah, blah.
No, I can admit that I have some bias because I do. I have a favorite
Everybody
color.
has
I have
bias.
a favorite food. But that bias does not bow into developing... You see what I'm saying? It's like, how come you can't have your favorite and then have to hate what isn't your favorite? This is the thing. This hate thing comes from somewhere. And I like where you're going with it. I like how you're digging deep. There's a bias. That everybody has a bias, and it could be as simple as their favorite food.
We're all subject to bias.
Well, why is that? Why is it that we are biased against human beings? Against, and you see how I use that word against?
Against, yes.
Why do we have a bias against human beings? Or I should say, why do we have a bias for our own race? And if we do have a bias for our own race, I don't know what else to compare it to except for romantic attraction.
Yes.
Or one of the primal things in humans.
It is a primal thing.
Here's the thing. I can be romantically attracted to, and have been in my past, to all different races of women.
Yes.
All different races.
Yeah.
I ended up with a honky-ass white woman German, yes, but that's just how it ended up. It's not that I couldn't have been attracted to and haven't been attracted to other races.
Yeah.
So, if I have a bias for my race, how come others seem to have, is it an anti-biased? What is that? What's your thought on that?
It's...
Because I don't have one, I need to know.
It goes back to competition. Just because, really, historically, if you want to go religiously, like according to the Bible, it's the fights that happened in between Africa and Europe.
Let's take history out of it. Let's not even talk about...
That's where it... I don't know, because that's where it originated from, and it's just progressed since then. If you want to take specifically black people and white people, the blacks take over the whites. Whites get angry. A century later, they enslave the blacks. A century later, the blacks get angry back, fight for their freedom, and then they're kind of equal for a little bit, which is like where we're at right now. It's always just been this back and forth. It started with competition of resources and land. Now it's...
But we don't have that anymore. That's what, you keep going into a history of it, and that doesn't make sense either, because how come in 2020 it hasn't been... We haven't in the last 100 years evolved away from that. The civil rights movement should have opened the eyes to...
You want to talk about the civil rights movement, the Reconstruction should have opened the eyes, and before that, the friggin' Civil War.
Where do... And here's the thing. This really gets under my skin. Where is it? How is it?
It's inherited.
Okay.
It's taught to you from generation to generation. You know how you get upbringing, your political, the way you view life, how you view life politically, socially, all that stuff is literally inherited from what you've been taught as a small child.
What you've been taught. It's taught. And now I've heard that that's
from your experiences, from your parents, and from what you experience in your own personal life based on the location you were raised.
So racists teach their kids to be racist. I don't buy that, because in the freaking playground, when you're in the playground and your guys are being kids, when we were all in the playground,
yes.
And there were people of different races, those children don't look at the racists and have a bias.
And that's why
they're just a human being to those kids.
It's the innocence of children. That's what you go in. But when you get to be my age, you have all the different political spectrums, all the different, from being very racist to anti-racist to all that stuff. It's all, there's at some point after a kid hears it over and over and over again, I don't know what age it is, if it's been pinpointed, and I know it's been scientifically studied about, but it's based... Your bias is created from your experiences based on place, your surroundings, and your parental experiences.
I can buy that. But how is it that, so because we weren't teaching you guys hate, you're not haters?
Yes.
You're telling me that you would not have grown up.
Say you hated your parents.
Not being a hater. Okay.
Say you hated your parents.
Yeah.
Then you go to, and they're teaching you not to hate. But then you go to school and there's a bunch of these people and they're like, these people, this social group sucks, this religious group sucks. Then you start to hate them because that's the influence that you choose to let influence you, and then you grow that mindset, and then, whoa, it's 5 years later and that's all you can think about. So
starting in middle school, when you're defining yourself, you're leaving...
School's a good example. You're going from the
well, you're closer to it. Think about it for a minute.
Yeah. Well, really recently, ever since the 5th grade, you start thinking about those things, I think.
Yeah?
That's for personally. I think others may have experienced that sooner or later, but...
Getting that biased.
Once you reach high school, into middle school, their quite literally is, it's almost like adults. There's the conservative party of kids, there's the liberal party of kids, there's kids that just don't give an F, there's
The thing that I find interesting about that is they have not experienced life to develop those attitudes.
they have
So it's based on a bias.
it's based on a bias that they've have experienced from their place and their parents and those social interactions that they've had with other people to develop that bias to where that's why education is the best thing. That's why people change sometimes when they go to college.
Right.
You'll have somebody go to college and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I was this big hater on, Christianity, but now I joined the YMCA or something while I was in college, and I'm a big religious person now." You change sometimes from education, so ignorance plays a role too.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're thinking, and I'm not saying that I disagree with you, I'm probably leaning more to agree with you that this thing that we know as racism is based on a bias that is developed in childhood by the things that you're surrounded by and found to be comfortable and
Yes.
and taught by your parents
Yes.
and relatives, adults in your life.
Think about it. If you were a kid and you had your parents just go like this all the time, all those darn African Americans, those darn African.
I know, I get it. That's for a
Wouldn't
long
that-
time. I left it there. I left it as it was something that was taught because certainly school kids don't get it. But
Yes, but wouldn't you think that over time you'd start to think that way too? Well, my mother says that, or my father says that, so why shouldn't I? Oh, I just see this guy. He's an African American. He's high in weed. Why not beat him up? Because weed's bad. And you know what? My mom and dad has been saying those darn African Americans is my entire life. Let's beat the crap out of them.
yes, I understand that.
Oh,
that is
and
a
now
taught.
I'm with a clique that thinks the same
Right.
thing, and so we'll do it as a
Right.
group.
That is a taught behavior. But back to what you were saying, how I just have the problem with it, and I'm getting so upset. I'm not even sure if I can formulate the words. That I can understand, but we're still free-thinking individuals, and the hate part, it's not real. It goes back to when we were younger and we hadn't developed these bias that you're talking about when we were in elementary school, when we were kindergartners playing kickball. We were all just kids.
Yes, but then mommy and daddy see you hanging out with someone they don't like, so they take you away and say you don't hang out with them.
And we are to assume that their mommy and daddy did the same to them. So it's a cycle.
It is a cycle, and maybe their mommy and daddy didn't do it, but then they're like, "Oh, that kid's mean. He's not hanging out with me," and then it's the dumbest of shit. Quite literally, the dumbest of shit that any thinking person could probably go, why do I act this way? Just self-reflection. But it happens every day. You're seeing today there's riots in Minneapolis and in 30 other states.
There were
including-
30 years ago and 30 years before that for the same fucking reasons.
Yes.
If it is a cycle,
You can't. That's the thing. How do you break the cycle of history?
isn't the pursuit of happiness is every individual's want and desire?
Yes.
It's what you strive to be.
But
Is
then
to
there's the slums, and the people in the slums just go, "Oh, this sucks. I'm not happy," and they want to be happy, so they choose somebody to hate on. We gotta
I
blame
think maybe-
our problems on someone else.
yes, we gotta blame the plumber. Yeah. God, I'm just getting livid.
Yep, but that's life.
I want to
That's what
have an
countries
intelligent
are-
conversation. I just want.
Yeah.
I think it's important. It's important to try and break this down. It's going to just keep all of it happening before and all of it happening again, and I don't want it to.
You don't want it to, but how do you stop it? That's
Here-
where nobody's figuring out. You can talk about it all you want, like we are right now, and maybe that helps. Maybe some people haven't heard of that or ever thought of it themselves. But you got to think, yeah, somebody's got to have thought about this, or we wouldn't have had the civil rights movement, or we wouldn't have had the Reconstruction, or the Civil War, or any of these other life-changing groups. Even if you want to go religiously, we wouldn't have religious groups if we would have thought, if this would have been a mutual understanding. We wouldn't have the Indian Wars. We wouldn't have any conflicts whatsoever.
You know what I
But
just thought
humans
of?
aren't
You know,
perfect.
you saying the word conflict makes me think that there is something that's happened lately that used to not be the case, at least in this country, that I was raised to believe, and it's not that I was biased to this ideology that I'm going to pontificate here in a moment, but it seems that intellectually, logically, intelligently, that this makes absolute sense, and that the opposition to this ideology is exactly what's happening now. The ideology of compromise. And then I'm just talking in government and trying to get things done.
Countries are built off of compromise.
Compromise is the only way that anything moves forward. You might have a position that you are so freaking embedded in, and the opposite position is so embedded in the opposing viewpoint that you have to realize that means you're going to get nowhere.
Yep.
You're going to get nowhere. Each side is going to have to give a little in order to move forward.
Yeah.
And I think nowadays the compromise is just no longer a consideration. It's seen as weakness. If you give up any of your position on any issue, you're weak.
Well, history has cycled through a stage like that before, where there is no compromise.
You gonna enlighten us as to
Well,
that point in history?
I'd like to say the 1950s is a big example, because that's when the civil rights movement started. Do you
Well,
remember?
there was plenty of compromise for other things. I mean, maybe not civil rights, because for whatever reason there were racists
Well, on the
in
topic
power.
of racism, the 1950s. Do you remember Rosa Parks?
No, I
Little
was
Rock
I
School?
was not alive.
I know
in the
you weren't
50s.
alive, but do you remember learning about this?
Yes, Rosa Parks, the
Little,
woman on the
Little
bus,
Rock
right?
School. Yep.
Yep.
The blah blah blah. They had to have the same thing happen, where there was no compromises for Rosa Parks. It ended up helping the civil rights movements because this was broadcasted media wise.
What do you mean there were no compromises for Rosa Parks? What are you talking
She
about?
was arrested.
Right, but
Yeah.
she was breaking the law at the time.
No, she wasn't. She wasn't breaking the federal law.
No, but the law in the state of Mississippi, I believe it was.
Yes, but the federal laws stated this wasn't allowed.
What wasn't allowed?
Mississippi was breaking the federal law.
Oh, I see.
She was breaking no,
Okay.
I believe. Might be a little early for that, but I believe that's how it went. Little Rock School. That girl,
That was Brown versus the Board of Education. Why is this making noise?
the Little Rock School, she had every right to go to school. I forgot. Oh my gosh, where was Little Rock School? She had every right, but the state of let's see, where was the state? I forgot the state.
Little Rock is in Arkansas.
Yes, the state of Arkansas defied the federal government, and therefore the federal government had to send the National Guard to let a girl go to school.
Gotcha. And your point on bringing up Rosa Parks and
Just
what was
it's-
Brown's first name? Do you know?
Brown versus I don't know.
It was a bunch of girls. It wasn't just
versus
Brown.
the
It was
board.
like a bunch of African Americans.
That no, but the thing about Little Rock 9
Little Rock
is-
9.
is that that civil the Supreme Court said with Brown versus the board that it wasn't okay, but then they basically said no, Brown versus the board, we're throwing that out and we're saying it is okay now. So Brown versus the board wasn't a compromise.
Right. Well, we need compromise. That was the point I was making. You need freaking compromise. With people, my God, this is the 21st fracking century.
Yep.
How come racists are in position of power?
Yep.
You know, it was like a discussion I had with your mom not too long ago about doing the right thing and being prepared for violence should violence break out, because our fucking idiot president is doing nothing but inciting violence with his stupid tweets of the looting starts, then the shooting starts. Are you fracking kidding me?
If anyone doesn't know, the historical context is there was a police chief in Florida that said that same thing back during the 1960s. I believe it was 67, when the civil rights movement, and that was said to, and then what followed that was Florida does not care about police brutality. We don't care if we're known for police brutality. Basically, they bought a bunch of shotguns and people stopped looting because they were afraid to get shot, and Florida was just going to allow the police to shoot people, mostly African Americans, that were doing the looting and protests. But
looting, here's the thing: is looting is wrong. Protesting,
wrong.
Okay. Burning
Peaceful
down buildings, wrong. Peacefully protesting,
You can
okay.
understand
I
that.
totally understand it. I don't fracking blame them.
Yeah.
Really, I don't. It's like what does it take to get it through the heads of the people in charge that this should not be tolerated? If you have racist police officers, you need to fracking fire them.
And they fire them, and if they commit a crime like murder, they should be, charged
With
for that.
murder,
Yeah.
exactly. And and that has happened too many times recently.
And when you want
Too
to
many
bring up
times
the
recently.
president, the problem with these ones that are happening right now, I'm sorry for going political, but if you look historically, the president during a time like this will fly to the state. They'll fly to Minnesota. They'll gather a large crowd and perform an address. And they'll say, yes, that was very wrong, but we must not loot. We must move forward with this. And the leader of the country will tell these people and the rest of the country
That they're going to try.
we're going to move forward.
Yes.
And we need to, get justice for this.
Yes.
But this looting is not justice. This violent protest is not justice. And I've heard it, and we need to stop it. But has Donald Trump done that?
No, he's done the opposite. He's saying, bring it on. We'll just shoot you.
Yeah. So that is another part of the protesting. It shouldn't last as long as it is last. I mean, it's lasted. Rodney King lasted for forever.
It was almost 2-3 weeks. It was a long damn time.
But it's usually after an event like this and riots start happening, a person in power, typically the president, will assure the people and the country that this will be resolved and we need to move forward. That is something that has not happened.
That's because our president is a racist. Oh, call a spade a spade. All fingers point to Donald Trump being a racist.
And that's where
see, why don't you stand up in front of the podium and say, yeah, I'm a racist. It's tremendous. It's perfect. Dick. Sorry.
And that's where you go political.
I didn't mean to, but
I know it's a very emotional topic.
It's very hard not to just.
And that's the problem. What I tried to explain was trying to get towards ignorance and explain it in a matter that, that just look for these things and then make that decision on your own.
I want to get back to what we were talking about. I felt that we were kind of coming up with some points. There has to be somehow. First, let's move on to it, or kind of go off on this tangent. I want to know, how do the racists get into powerful positions? How does how is it that the fucking president of the country is a racist and we elected him? How does that happen? What's your generation think of stuff like that? Are you guys just as polarized as apparently
Yes.
the people that you are? That's bad news.
It is very bad news because when he was elected, I was in a school that everybody came to school with those shirts. Everybody came to school with those hats on. Everybody came to school, and there was a big lunch party where the principal got on and was like, woo! Now, if the opposition in the 2016 election was elected, Hillary Clinton, I can't say her name very well, that was enough to make my mother go, you're not going to go to school tomorrow. So yes, there is that opposition, and that's because the kids around my age group in my area have been taught that by their beautiful parents.
Well, I'm going to just say for the record, Hillary Clinton was just a big enough piece of shit as Donald Trump.
Yes.
She was, and still is, a big fat fucking liar. I mean, to the point where people die. She has no relevance for anyone other than her own political gain. She's in there with freaking the chick. Oh God, I can't even think of her name. The leader of the House of Representatives right now, Pelosi and McConnell. They're both dickheads. The thing is we as a citizenry have allowed through, I don't know what it is, empathy. What's the word I'm thinking of?
Well, I don't know.
The lack of caring.
Oh, it's not empathy.
It's not empathy, I know that. Apathy.
Yes.
Through apathy, I have allowed this to happen, and really the shame needs to be put on each and every fucking person that didn't vote.
Yep. And that goes back to your voting, and you can't just go, oh, well, I'm associated with this political party, so I must believe that.
That's bullshit. Everyone should be an independent. Everyone should be an independent.
And they don't even have to call themselves independent, just no political party.
No political affiliation,
Yeah.
exactly.
Independent's the closest thing to having no political affiliation. That's why independent is usually a term loosely used to describe that.
Well, I think, and I think, because I'm out there in the world, I talk to people. I think most people are really independent. But
You want to think that, but
I do think that, Hayden. I think that most people,
the last election made me not think that.
But we talked about this in another podcast. How many people voted? How many of the registered people voted? How many people are registered that
54,
are allowed to vote? That
there's
nobody is participating.
Yep.
I shouldn't say
Do you
nobody.
think
I should
more
say we
people
found
will-
out that the majority of people that should be voting aren't.
Yes, and then there's a buttload more that aren't even registered.
Which means the minority viewpoint is what's controlling the entire country. Wake the frack up, people.
Yep. I don't see any
I
disagreement.
answer my own question.
Yeah.
How is it the racists become to power? Because they are the minority viewpoint and they're the only ones voting.
Basically, yep. And that's all inherited and spread.
And that minority viewpoint sets forth these freaking... They knock over the dominoes. The minority viewpoint has now the entire country enraged. And people are getting killed because of the minority viewpoint, because the majority can't step up to the freaking plate, and they've somehow been
Check a
tricked
little box.
into thinking that their vote doesn't count. When they are the majority, they're not participating, and their freaking vote would count if they cast it.
And if the majority voted and we'd still have this conversation, then you wouldn't have those people to blame.
Precisely. Exactly.
Would you like to move on to some of these other stories real fast? George Floyd was the most recent. We have...
God bless George Floyd and his family.
Yes.
I don't know that man, but every indication points out that he was a gentle giant. He had his trouble with the law, but then he's a black man in a racist freaking place. So what are you going to do? You're going to have trouble.
And Breonna Breonna Taylor was also killed March 13th, 2020. This is another recent hate crime.
What was that one?
That was the one where her and I believe her boyfriend were in their house, and they heard scuffling outside. They thought they were being robbed. So
and the cop shot her through the window.
And the cops were checking out because I think they had drug information on, and the cops saw her with the gun and shot her through the window.
Through the window.
Yes.
Murder.
Yes.
Anybody else were to shoot someone who's standing in their house, the outside should be tried with murder. That is a sniper.
It's not like the cop was trying to arrest or anything, and she pulled out a gun. She was just looking.
Standing in the window.
She was looking around for a robber.
There's body camera footage of that, isn't there?
I don't know. I think there might be. I haven't looked at that one. One I have looked at was the George Floyd. That one, there's a lot of witnesses. There's security footage and witness footage.
Yeah, I don't know. You and your mom both watch these videos.
They're graphic, but they're violent, but they're, movies, you'll see someone get shot, blood flies everywhere.
There's a difference. In a movie, you're suspending disbelief. Those are actors. Nobody's dying. When you're watching these home videos, you're seeing a person lose their life.
You're seeing them lose their life. I'm just saying they're not.
And let me just explain something. I am not, that's not something that I'm afraid of. So don't think for a minute that I'm afraid to see someone losing their life. I just think it is not necessary.
It's just disgusting.
It is.
Which I was curious, so I had to look. But because the thing about you saying not necessary is bias gets into those news stories that you hear.
Right.
And seeing it for yourself, you can draw your own conclusions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So there was Breonna Taylor, and then another recent one in February 23rd, 2020 was Ahmaud Arbery.
Arbery was the guy shot in the back? No.
He was.
Jeez, I wished I could.
He was
here. The thing is I have vague memories of these. Your mom, if you mention their name, she knows exactly.
He was jogging. This wasn't a police brutality one. This was the one.
Oh, this is the one where the two freaking racist, dad and the son,
like we are right now. We're seeing their security footage of this. I think it was a building or a house being put up, and
vigilante.
Ahmaud was just looking around. Nobody knows if he was going to steal anything or anything. You know how you kind of just go, ooh, there's a house up. Let me just go walk there. He might have just been doing that. I know I like to look at houses. That
are being built. Yeah, you kind of go in and get an idea of the floor plan.
Yeah.
There's no malicious intent.
As long as you don't steal anything.
Yes.
That house had something stolen recently. So they might have thought, oh, he's back. Oh, this guy might steal. Nobody knows if he was going to steal anything. He didn't. But basically, a filmer, a dad and a son, pull up, and the guy filming tries to block him with his car, but he takes off running. The dad and the son chase after him and shoot him. Dead. Murder. And I think the guy filming was also just convicted.
I think he was just tried, and that should be the case, because that's another damn thing too, is people trying to put up movies that they take and they incite things. I mean, people, this was an insightful thing. If they're filming that to get it on the internet, that is a motive.
Unless it's like a witness thing.
He didn't just show up. That dude was part of the program.
I'm just saying, if you're a witness and you're filming it, please film it, because that helps the people.
This was not that case. This was incited.
This was a guy probably trying to create a manifesto or something.
Exactly. No, that's racism. That's straight up.
That's another recent one. A couple years ago, September 6th, there's Amber Geyer, which is a police officer that shot someone in the apartment. She thought it was hers or something.
She's a racist.
And she shot
She claims that she's not. The thing is, my God, I am so sick of this too. I don't know.
She was off duty too.
It doesn't matter. The thing is a racist when you see one. Okay? What the motivation is behind a person's actions.
They not necessarily want to murder them, but they won't stop them they won't take extra precaution not to kill someone.
Precisely. They're not treating them as a peer.
And
they're treating him something lesser than, like an animal. You know, it's just, you know, and animals deserve respect, but still, they have no respect for a human being, regardless of the frickin' color of their skin. That's the racism. That's it, right
you want
there.
to see the biggest racist one?
No, I don't. Walter Scott.
Walter Scott.
He's the guy that got shot in the
April
back.
4th, 2015.
That I did see that video with your mom, and that is the most disturbing fracking thing. That fucking cop is a murderer. He murdered that man. That is murder in the freaking simplest sense. Shot him in the back.
Yes.
Absolute murder. God, that was horrific.
Yep.
So,
that video is very sad. And you can tell if you watch the video. If you don't want to, that's fine.
no, I mean, we're not watching the videos.
I know.
I
I'm
don't
not
need to
saying
see
whether
these
you want,
videos.
but I'm just saying if you do, you can
I
draw
did.
your own conclusion.
I drew my
to say
conclusion. Guess
that
what?
is
I drew my
murder.
conclusion.
The guy is clearly running
away. Running away. And you know why he's running away? Because that person has dealt with racists their whole life. And he knows a racist when he sees one. And he figures his life at that point is in danger.
And cops are not supposed to shoot at fleeing. If they're supposed to shoot if somebody's threatening another civilian with a gun, if they're threatening themselves with a gun, or if there's already been shots fired. Even if they're holding a weapon and they're running away and they haven't shot anyone, they're not supposed to shoot them.
No, kidding.
And I know this because I went to a local police station and had training with them, and we went through a simulator.
Yep.
And a cop explained that to me because I made the wrong decision.
Well, I had explained to me by someone recently that, and this was something that I was surprised. Big old redneck guy that I work with that you would never suspect would have this attitude, but he did. Because he went through concealed carry training, and the officer that was giving that class, you know, explained to him, you know, he's like, "What if someone breaks in your house? What are you going to do?" And I'm going to shoot them dead. I don't have time for it. That's it. They're done. Game over. And he says, "Is your stereo worth a human life? Is your television worth a human life?" And I'm like, "No."
And
he
this
goes,
is a guy you
basically,
wouldn't think
this
to
is a guy I would
explain
never
this.
think for. My attitude was piss poor. I'm the one who said I'm going to shoot him dead because I am protecting you and the girls.
But
That's
you don't shoot him dead unless he's threatening you with another lethal weapon, or if he's already
Exactly.
threatened.
Exactly. If you don't do it unless he's threatening you
Because
with a
most
weapon
likely
or
when he
someone
sees
else.
your weapon, he's not going to pull out his own. He's going to run away.
Run away. Yeah, and this is just stuff that you just don't consider. But in today's, the way things are today, and just living through what I've lived through, living through the riots, watching Reginald Denny, that guy damn near died. He was literally almost beaten to death. Reginald Denny, are you familiar with him?
No.
He was the truck driver that drove through the intersection of Florence and Normandy at the sparking point of the Los Angeles riots in March of '91. And what happened to him was he drove into that intersection. There had been a traffic accident, and he could not successfully negotiate the accident to get to where he was going. Now, this is a guy that just happened to be driving through there. He was working, had no idea that this was about ready to happen. And somebody threw a brick at the truck, and he reacted to it. Now, this is all pictures that I saw from a helicopter while sitting at home.
Yep.
These were live being beamed into my house while we were all sitting there with our jaws on the floor. Then somebody showed up and dragged him out of the cab of the truck. Others joined in, and they started kicking him and punching him. They threw bricks at his head. Some dude showed up with a rifle and tried to explode the truck with his body by firing a blast at the fuel tanks of the truck to try and ignite it on fire to burn him and his whole truck up. Finally, somebody that lived down there was able to get to him and get to him safely, but he would have died.
Yep. I didn't hear about that one.
It's just part of the thing. Any one of us, and here's the thing. Now that we're probably on the verge of a race war, because we have a fucking president
Which has
inciting the
happened before.
redneck dicks into wanting to be part of this. He's inciting all his base, which are redneck dicks. Okay?
The minority that voted for
The minority. the minority viewpoint, all his base. And he doesn't need a lot because the rest of you fuckers don't go out and vote.
And we better hope it's the minority or we're all left, just putting it that
It
way.
is the minority.
It's gotta be.
It is the minority. But these people don't vote because they think it's a waste. Well, I didn't vote for Hillary and I didn't vote for Donald Trump. And if we all voted for somebody, I voted for Gary Johnson just because I couldn't in good conscience vote for either one of those.
Yep.
I could not in good conscience.
If I
In hindsight, I would have voted for Hillary because I don't think she would have been inciting violence.
At least not that. She's still not the person.
No, the Democratic Party is full of tyranny right now. The DNC is just look at what happened to Bernie. Look at what all the candidates that had belief. They believed in something. Yang, he believed in. They all believed in something. Even Waters for her lack of freaking.
Warren.
That's what I meant. Warren. Even Warren, for lack of her actual insight to things, she believed in something. They put aside their beliefs for the party, and the party dictated we can't let Bernie win. They hate Bernie.
Yep.
Tyranny.
Because he's a socialist and he's...
No, because he can't be controlled by them.
Yep. Because he's a socialist in quotes.
No, they're socialists too. You don't get it. He can't be controlled by them. He might put forth good socialist ideas. You know, there are good socialist ideas.
Yes.
I mean, what is...
Socialist is that... It's
what
not
is the school
a middle
system?
place between
what
capitalism
is
and communism.
Public
It's the
education?
line.
What is the military that protects us? What is the fire department that protects us? What is the police? Those are socialist ideals.
Yes.
So Bernie might have pushed forth some good socialist ideas, not the ones they wanted.
But that's because if you drew out communism and capitalism on a line like this, and you said this was capitalism and this was communism, socialism isn't this middle marker in between.
No,
it's the entire line.
It's the entire line. Very good. No, that's the thing. And if we all had decided that I've had enough of this bullshit, I'll go for who's this Gary Johnson guy? Sure, he doesn't know where Baghdad is, or somebody asked him a question. Where's Baghdad? Do you remember that?
No.
Or maybe it was Benghazi. What do you think of Benghazi? He didn't even know where it was. Well, screw it. Maybe he was going to concentrate on issues here in this country that needed attention given to him.
And even if you were to vote and you didn't vote for Gary Johnson, at least you could keep someone out from being, a hate inciter.
If they just voted their conscience. I voted and I wasn't the only one. If you recall, that Gary Johnson guy got a huge percentage of the vote.
He got like 2.
No, he got more than 2. In fact, I believe that they try to say that he was the reason that Trump won is because we didn't vote for the lesser of 2 evils. Yeah, you looking that up right now?
Yeah.
Quicker. There you go. Okay, foreign Gary. No. 26 presidents. Okay, go ahead. Hit the 26. How many times Gary Johnson ran for... What percentage of the 2016 vote did Gary Johnson receive? Joe Exotic just popped up there. That's funny.
He got 1.3 million votes, or 1% of the popular vote.
1% of the popular vote. So 1% of the teeny minority of people that were voting actually voted for Gary Johnson.
Yes.
That's huge.
It's bigger for an independent candidate than other years, but it's not the biggest we've seen in history.
1.3 million people voted for him. How many people actually voted? 100 million?
That's only 1% of the popular, so yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And there were 250 more million that could have voted and didn't?
Even more. Well, there's 250 million that could have voted because the rest are probably children. So maybe 200 million probably.
Sure, whatever it was. Like I said, the dicks that do not vote are right up my alley. I put them on my pedestal of the part of the problem.
And if you want to see history cycle, do you remember, or you wouldn't be alive, but do you remember hearing about Emmett Till?
Emmett Till is a name that does ring a bell.
He is the one, August 28th, 1955.
Emmett Till.
This is during the Civil Rights Movement.
Uh-huh.
He was a kid that was basically he went to some southern state, I forgot which state it was, in Mississippi. He went to Mississippi.
Oh, yes. Mississippi Burning.
To go with visit some relatives.
Right.
He was like a kid my age.
Yep.
14-year-old.
Yep,
so
and the
2
Ku
years
Klux
younger.
Klan.
And so they probably were KKK members, but he had to be told, hey, don't do these things because you're going to a southern state, you can't do these things.
Right.
And he whistled at a white woman that he thought was pretty
Mm-hmm.
coming out of the store, and her man got mad at him, ended up kidnapping him in the middle of the night
Yeah.
from his family,
With the rest of the Ku Klux Klan.
just with 3 people.
Okay, whatever.
And then dragged him out, beat him to death, or not beat him to death, lynched him. They beat him, lynched him, tied him to a fan, threw him into the river, where he was later found and had an open casket funeral
Ugh.
that was put all over the media across America, helping the Civil Rights Party.
Well, that's... Ugh. Write this down. Mississippi Burning is a great film for you to watch.
Mississippi what?
Mississippi Burning. Great film. Gene Hackman. God, that guy's good. Yeah.
Burning?
Mississippi Burning. It's an old movie from my era.
What's it about?
It's about this. It's not literally this, but it's the same. It's the same thing.
Would you recommend it to our listeners?
Oh, absolutely. Damn straight. Yes. I'd hope that our listeners would already know it. Although I hope that we reach the opposing viewpoint. What are you doing? Nope, you're handing me a slip of paper. This just off the. Is it that time already?
It is that time. Yes,
Okay.
I'm
Well,
sorry.
I don't feel we're done. So maybe we
don't?
go a little bit.
Well, I think we are. I don't have anything else unless you got something.
I want to know. This is the thing that kind of has me a little worried. I asked about are the people at your school as polarized as the people my generation? And you said yes.
Yes.
And I said, and now I want to know, how are you certain?
Here's the thing. I'm friends with people that have the complete opposite viewpoint as I do. And I don't know if this is the same with your generation, but we have these opposite viewpoints, but we're still able to look past that.
What do you mean? You're friends with racists?
Not racist, but conservatives.
Okay, so political opposing.
Political opposing, religious opposing,
Yeah,
blah, blah, blah. We have huge arguments over it.
right.
Yelling fits. But an hour after that argument, we act like everything's normal. And we can still understand that, hey, we may have different viewpoints, but we're still people. And that I respect.
That's exactly what needs to happen. That is healthy damn discourse. That gives me kind of hope for the future to hear you say that, actually. Because what happens to the people in my generation is they can't see past that person being a human being and not their view.
And that's why I know we're very politically oppositions. We still have those very polarized oppositions, but I do have hope for that idea of, hey, we're still all human, and yes, I respect that you have that. I may disagree. I may have arguments with you about it, but we can still wake up the next morning and do a school project together, create something in an organization, make NHS a better place, make Mu Alpha Theta, which is Math National Honor Society, a better place. Even teachers we've had political talk with and very philosophical talk with about religion and politics and blah, 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 where we'll even disagree with different teachers. And
How often-
we can still come to class with them. A lot of our teachers are younger.
Yeah, they are. How often do you find yourselves in conversations where you agree on things?
Only when you are with someone you agree with, or if you are on a topic that is non-politically based.
Yeah, I think. Well, are you understanding? So you're friends. So obviously you must have things in common. I mean, things that you agree on. I mean, just views on
Yes.
different things.
Mostly
So-
school related, like, because I'm in a nerdy group. Math is a very easy one.
Well, math is
Science.
black and white. There's not too much you can have. There's no gray area for an argument
Oh,
with
there's
math.
a lot of gray area for arguments in math, and math can get political, and science is subject to bias.
That's ridiculous because it's also math.
Just ask Neil deGrasse Tyson. He has a whole master class about how science is subjected to bias.
Where do you find that class?
Oh, you have to pay for it on Masterclass. But yeah, I've just seen those ads, and he talks about everything
Hey,
subject to
this
bias.
just went offline. A phone call came in, and now it's doing this.
Or you ran out of space.
New recording.
You ended at 110. Mine's at 111, so you missed a minute.
Okay, well then I'll just come over here. And
Yep.
we'll continue over here. So what, is my phone full or something?
Probably, yeah.
Okay, we'll have to clean it up. So I guess back to what I was saying, you do agree on things, and you have your groups where you agree, but you have that healthy discourse that doesn't lead to people hating.
Yeah. Yeah, overall.
That I think is a good point to end on.
Okay. Well, would you like to?
Yes, of course. Because we're making a podcast. Thank you for listening to this episode of Conversation Transfer.
If you like this episode, you could try more on Apple Podcasts or on our hosting website. Stay safe, keep thinking, and keep
Keep talking.
talking.